2021 San Francisco Ethics Commission regular meeting, and this meeting is being held by teleconference pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N2920 and the 12th Supplement to the Mayoral Proclamation declaring the existence of a local emergency dated February 25th, 2020. Before we proceed further, I'd like to ask Commission staff member Ronald Contreras, who is acting as our moderator, to explain some procedures for today's meeting. Thanks, Ronald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then can you please mute yourself? Thank you. The minutes of this meeting will reflect that due to the COVID-19 health emergency and to protect Commission members, city employees, and the public, the meeting rooms of City Hall are closed. However, Commission members and staff will be participating in today's meeting remotely. This precaution is taken pursuant to the various local, state, and federal orders, declarations, and directives. Commission members will attend the meeting through video conference and participate in the meeting to the same extent as if they were physically present. Please note that today's meeting is being live cablecast on SF-Gov TV and streamed live online at sfgovtv.org/ethicslive. Once again, streamed live online at sfgovtv.org/ethicslive. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments or opportunities to speak during the public comment period are available via phone call by calling 1-415-655-0001. Again, the phone number is 1-415-655-0001. Access code is 187-850-2440. Again, access code is 187-850-2440, followed by the pound sign. Then press pound again to join as an attendee. You will hear a beep when you are connected to the meeting. You will automatically be muted and in listening mode only. When your item of interest comes up, dial *3 to raise your hand and to be added to the public comment line. You will then hear you have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait until the host calls on you. The line will be silent as you wait your turn to speak. Ensure that you are in a quiet location. Before you speak, mute the sound of any equipment around you, including television, radio, or computer. It is especially important that you mute your computer if you are watching via the web link to prevent feedback and echo when you speak. When the system message says your line has been unmuted, this is your turn to speak. You will hear staff say, "Welcome, caller." We encourage you to state your name clearly. As soon as you begin speaking, you will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You'll hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you change your mind and wish to withdraw yourself from public comment line, press *3 again. You will hear the system say you have lowered your hand. Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you and mute you. You will hear your line has been muted. Attendees who wish to speak during other public comment periods may stay on the line and listen for the next public comment opportunity and should raise their hands to enter the public comment line by pressing *3 when their next item of interest comes up. Public comment may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Once again, written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Ronald. I would like to call the meeting to order. And Mr. Moderator, would you please proceed with item number 1, the Commission roll call?
Commissioners, please unmute your microphones so that you can verbally state your presence at today's meeting after your name is called. Chair Ambrose.
Present.
Commissioner Bush.
Commissioner Bush will be joining us shortly as soon as some technological issues are resolved. Thank you.
Commissioner Chu.
Present.
Vice Chair Lee.
Present.
Commissioner Bell.
Present.
Madam Chair, with 4 members present and accounted for, you have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. I want to call agenda item number 2, public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. Members of the public who are already online and wish to speak should now dial *3. If you have not already done so, to be added to the public comment line. Mr. Moderator, please proceed with public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics Commission is now receiving public comment on agenda item number 2 remotely in this meeting. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to provide public comment. If you join the meeting early to listen to the proceedings, now is the time to get into the line to speak. If you have not already, please press *3. It's important that you press *3 only once to enter the queue, as pressing it again will move you out of the public comment line and back into listening mode. Once you are in the queue and standing by, the system will prompt you when it's your turn to speak, so it's important that you call from a quiet location. Please address your comment to the Commission as a whole and not to individual members. Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. Madam Chair, we have callers in the queue. Please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Good morning, Commissioner. My name is Ellen Lee Zhao. That is ELLEN LEEZ as in zebra, HOU. I am a public employee, and I am a union delegate for the government employees. And I'm also a member for Revival San Francisco. I have been coming to Ethics Commission with many government employees in different days back in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. The last time I spoke to you guys before the COVID-19, before you shut down the entire City Hall, was February 27, 2020. After I ran for mayor San Francisco in June 2019 and 2018, I have been coming to you to report about election fraud. In 2019, 115-year-old, 2 voters, 150-years-old, 3 voters, 136-years-old, 1 voter, 119-years-old, 659 voters, 100 to 109-years-old, 247 voters. 2020 is the election fraud that is created by SID. It's illegit. You and I know I have been reporting to you, but the election official did not do a thing about removal dead people. 2019, more than 468 people died on San Francisco streets. Last year, 2020, the wicked politicians authorized $5,000 a month for people to sleep on the street inside the tent. 2020, more than 625 people passed away on the street of San Francisco, plus 48 people died from gunshots. Now 2021 is here. We have 20% empty units, while people, hardworking people, had no affordable housing. San Francisco has been running by one party, Democrats. They're also called communism. They're evil, they're demonic, they're electoral officials. There's only 18 of them. They pay to play. They're baby killers. They're supporting illegal drugs and human traffickers. And now they're defunding the police and put us, the entire San Francisco, at risk. We have a bunch of dictators running a failing government by creating unconstitutional policies that on purpose, that is killing the entire San Francisco. Now, they not only abuse public power, this public school refused, unable to open. Where is the public money in San Francisco? And we also have a mayor plus the 17 electoral officials. There's only 18 of the dictatorship running a dictator government. And I'm here today to speak to you. And I want to thank you for your time because many of you are volunteers. Just like me, I'm volunteering and represent San Francisco. I have been in San Francisco for the last 35 years. I have never experienced such a dictator government failing tyranny dictatorship running by a bunch of dictators. I'm here today to ask you, ethics commissions that you will set up to restore law and order, to protect the lawlessness that we are seeing
Your 30 minutes have
in the
expired.
politicians. And I'm here to ask you, if you are publicly serving and you're not open at City Hall, you are part of the problems that we are facing. Many of the politicians, they all get paid, they get raises while people are dying on the street. I'm asking you, as at the commission,
Thank you,
I
caller.
have your law.
Yes, thank you, caller. Your 3 minutes has expired. Thank you so much. Please stand by. We are checking to see if there are any callers, additional callers in the queue. Madam Chair, there are no more callers in the queue.
All right, thank you. Hearing no further callers, general public comment under item 2 is now closed. Thank you. Hearing no further callers, we will now call item consent calendar, agenda item 3, draft minutes for the February 12th, 2021 Ethics Commission regular meeting. And I want to acknowledge that our fellow commissioner, Commissioner Bush, is now with us. Hello there. Hope you're feeling better. You're muted, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and call agenda item number 3. If any members of the public intend to offer public comment for the consent item, they should dial in now and enter *3 to be added to the public comment queue. Item 3 is on consent. This item is considered routine. If a commissioner objects, an item can be removed and considered separately. Does any commissioner wish to speak to the minutes of the February 12th, 2021 meeting? Commissioner Bush.
I don't have the minutes in front of me, but I think at the end of the minutes where it talks about commissioner proposals for future meetings, it mentions that I raised the issue of implementing the recommendations of the controller, but it doesn't say that I asked specifically that the recommendations be put into draft form and returned back to the commission. Am I correct in looking at that?
Yeah, I guess somebody can go back and look at the record. If you want to have that corrected, then we'll just put the minutes over to the next meeting and have that addressed. And in terms of the underlying subject matter, the actions on the controller, that will be our next agenda item number 4. So we can talk about what we want to do on those.
And I'm looking forward to that. But in the meantime, I do want it on the record that I asked specifically that the recommendations be turned into draft legislation and returned to the commission. And that was not responded to in the minutes, and I don't think it's on the agenda that way either for this meeting.
Okay. Yeah, well, no, I'm happy if I can get a motion to continue the agenda item number 3 to the meeting of the commission in April. And then I'm assuming Director Pelham, you'll look back at the tape and correct the minutes and bring that back for our decision. Okay, and then we'll address the substance of drafting legislation around the controller's recommendations as we pick up agenda item number 4. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Commissioner Lee, and if you could call the roll, Mr. Moderator.
A motion has been made and seconded. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush,
Present.
No, this is for, okay, go ahead.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Chair Ambrose.
Aye.
With 5 votes in the affirmative and 0
Oh,
votes
wait.
opposed, the motion is.
I just, wait a minute, hang on, stop. We forgot to ask for public comment on that vote. So
Okay.
going back, my apologies, I'm a little slow this morning. Hold that thought, and Mr. Moderator, can you please make the announcement for public comment?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics Commission is now receiving public comment on consent calendar item number 3 remotely in this meeting. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to provide public comment. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you joined the meeting early to listen to the proceedings, now is the time to get in line to speak. If you have not already, please press *3. It is important that you press *3 only once to enter the queue, as pressing it again will move you out of the public comment line and back into listening mode. Once you are in the queue and standing by, the system will prompt you when it's your turn to speak. So it's important that you call from a quiet location. Please address your comments to the commission as a whole and not to individual members. Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. Please stand by. All right, we do have a caller in the queue. Please stand by.
And somebody isn't muted. I don't know who that is, but
I'm going to mute you, Commissioner Bush. I think that's where the feedback was coming from. Okay. All right, please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now. Caller, are you there? Okay, it looks like this caller is actually the same individual from the last public comment just a moment ago. Looks like they're in here twice. Are you answering this line or responding to this line, caller? Okay. Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there's any other callers in the queue. Please stand by. Thank you, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Well, thank you. I have no idea what happened to the line. My name is Ellen. I spoke just minutes ago. My name is Ellen, E-L-L-E-N, L-E-E-Z-H-O-U. As I look at some of your minute items, you bunch of people running City Hall, a fake City Hall. City Hall should not be closed. It is healthy, safe enough for all the people who work at City Hall, include your commissioner, should be open for public to do business for San Francisco. 2020, we have 30% of the business failed because of City Hall. Your department, Ethics Commission department, do not support our public the constitutional way. As you can see, some of the items you keep talking about to yourself, and I believe that I am the only one so far speak on behalf of the public today for the entire San Francisco. So you're basically running a failed commission, ethics commission. According to what we see in United States, we have 50 states in America, 27 states that are Republican-run cities and states. They are open. They're open for business. They're open to travel. There's no curfew. They're open for public school. But San Francisco, look around in front of you, next to you in San Francisco. What have you done to damage? Your meetings are not productive, has been killing San Francisco in the entire 2020. Now we are talking about 2021. Please have a heart for San Francisco. We open San Francisco public school, 100% open San Francisco business, 100% open government. The government needs to function for people to live a healthy, safe life. Advocate for yourself, for your own safety. Advocate for your family. Advocate for all the people in San Francisco. Be open. Do not let the 18 lawless politicians, corrupted, immoral politicians, continue to hold on to the city, hold the city hostage. We see it from other states. We open San Francisco. Forget about your lawless menace. You're not doing your job. You fail the public agenda as an ethics commissioners. May God bless your heart, bless your head. Have a heart for San Francisco. We do not need to close. We open City Hall. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. All right, we are checking to see if there are any other callers in the queue. Please stand by. Madam Chair, there's no further callers in the queue. You are muted, Chair Ambrose.
So sorry. Here we go. Public comment on agenda item 3 is closed. We had a motion on the floor from Commissioner Chu, seconded by Commissioner Lee, to defer action on the minutes for the February 12th, 2021 meeting to the next meeting. Can you please call the roll?
A motion has been made and seconded. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush,
Yes.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lee,
Aye.
Commissioner Bell,
Aye.
Chair Ambrose.
Aye.
With 5 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm going to now call agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on the staff policy report, including the policy prioritization plan. You should all have received materials in your packet, and I'm going to turn it over to Pat Ford to make a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ambrose. Morning, Commissioners. As per usual, I won't make a full presentation. I know your preference is for me to not restate what's in the report, so I will just highlight that this month I did attach the policy prioritization plan to the staff policy report. And for anybody watching, this is the quarterly tool that the Commission uses to plan the policy projects that it wants to focus on for the next quarter. And in this particular installment of the plan, I'm recommending that the Commission maintain the current conflict of interest review project that's been ongoing since September of last year. This project is to respond to what we're learning through the various corruption investigations ongoing, including federal investigations and those by both the Controller and the City Attorney's Office. So thus far, the project has produced 1 ordinance, which is pending at the Rules Committee right now of the Board of Supervisors. And I do have an update on that, which is that a substitute of the legislation should be introduced next week. That brings the legislation pretty nearly into line with what the Commission approved back in November. So I think that's a really positive update and it's good progress on this project. And hopefully the meet and confer process for that ordinance will go smoothly and it will be approved by the board, and I will continue to keep you updated on that. But in the interim, I am recommending that you maintain this project as the sole policy project. It's a major project. I think it warrants that level of attention. And as I discussed in the report, the next phase would be to look at gift rules. That's something that the Controller's Office has recommended that we review. One of their deliverables, they recommended that gift rules be closely examined because of how much they were an issue in the various investigations. So that's what I'm proposing will be the next phase of the project. So I will stop there and glad to answer any questions that you have.
I received a briefing on
myself.
this matter, and I thought it was well thought out. So I want to thank the staff for the briefing, and I feel tremendously caught up with the issues involved with this.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. I'd like a little more information about this, the next phase and gift rules. And in particular, I think I recall the Controller's Office is going to be focusing on disclosure requirements and disclosure so-called loopholes. And I know that because that's completely within the Ethics Commission wheelhouse, that you're going to be working closely with them. But I'd like to know when we're going to start to see some specific substantive recommendations, along the lines of what Commissioner Bush had called for, starting to identify specific legislative agendas for each of the underlying problem areas, I think would help us all stay on track and make sure that, in particular, I guess my concern is, I know, the legislative season of the board, if we don't get legislation introduced in the next 2 months, come May and June, their entire attention shifts to the budget. And then they usually take off a couple weeks in August. I know they didn't last year during the emergency, but I'm expecting that they may well this time. And then we would be into September before legislation would even start to move again actively through committee. And so I'm anxious that we, sort of push hard in this month in particular so that we're, whatever is going to go forward. And I see, you point out that Supervisor Haney has the sort of same timeline in mind because he's going to move amendments to the legislation that kind of has been sitting dormant since November. But for our purposes, if we're going to want to make specific recommendations, particularly on the gift rules, which I know is a kind of touchy subject sometimes, I guess my question to you is, are we going to see something substantive at the commission in April in the way of specific recommendations about what and how the gift disclosures or reporting might be handled in the city?
I'm more than happy to if that's what the commission would like, but I will point out that would be a bit of a deviation from what our typical process has been. Typically what the commission has preferred is for me to conduct interested persons meetings at the outset of any phase of a policy project. So we would get the stakeholders together, have a series of meetings, solicit ideas from them. That process usually takes a couple of weeks to put together and then a week to host them. And then at that point, then we start to analyze what we've heard from people. In the past, when we haven't done that, that's later stalled the process. If we just start with staff recommendations and we skip stakeholder engagement up front, then the stakeholders come to the commission meeting and say they weren't consulted. So I think it's really important that we do that up front.
Well, I guess I'm not really saying that we necessarily need to have action on it on April, but I think it's having a conversation about what the menu of options that are being discussed. It's like we've seen from the controller's report some fairly general, recommendations like tighten the gift rules or improve auditing. But if we're gonna, and I've participated in some of the stakeholder meetings. I mean, sometimes you have a very limited engagement there. And I don't know if we can expect them to be the ones to suggest specifically, this particular rule needs to be tightened. I'll be honest, I mean, my concern is that we have some of the most stringent and specific gift rules on the books right now. And the problem with the corruption scandal wasn't that we didn't have rules that prevented most of what happened. We didn't have compliance with the rules. And, so some of the things I want to talk about is the problem of using third-party nonprofit organizations as laundry for funds that would not have that they would not have been allowed to solicit directly. And I don't know if that's something that the controller's office or any of the supervisors are talking about. But if we don't, engage in the specifics, in my experience, that is how you move it forward. And I'm not talking about just putting something up and acting on it without engaging with the community. That's absolutely not my idea. But I would like to know that we're going to talk specifically about what is it in the regulation of gifts that we have in mind that might improve our compliance. Anyway, I'm taking up too much time. I see everybody else's hand is up. So I'm going to start, Commissioner Chu, you have your hand up.
I have a question on process as well. So this is the Mann-Haney's proposed legislation. When it goes to the Rules Committee, it's going to go to the board. And so due to an unfortunate, I think, drafting omission, whatever the board approves in that legislation is not required to come back to the Ethics Commission for our approval. Is that right, Pat? Mr. Ford?
That's correct.
Okay, so that if their proposal does not go as far as what we would like, then we're kind of stuck on that front. So that leads into my second question. I know that there are several recall petitions that are circulating right now, and I believe that an election is not currently scheduled for this November. But if that changes, do we know when the deadline would be for an election to be held if there is enough signatures for a recall petition? And if there is an election this fall, would it be possible to put a ballot measure on with the, hypothetically, with a package of, or an ordinance with the rules and regulation changes that we would seek?
Wondering if I might defer to Deputy City Attorney Shen on those questions.
Yeah, good morning, Commissioner Chu, Andrew Shen, Deputy City Attorney. So a couple of responses to your questions. So the first is that even though this ordinance is not formally subject to the Ethics Commission's approval, the Ethics Commission can certainly weigh in on the ordinance. If the Ethics Commission feels like there's things that should be covered but aren't, there are ways to, bring it, have the relevant parties, come before the commission, describe the ordinance, make recommendations, ask Mr. Ford to present those recommendations or thoughts to the Rules Committee. There are other ways the Ethics Commission can continue to play a part in this process. As to your timing / election question, obviously the recall election for potentially this fall is an ever evolving matter. You may have read in the press that those signatures in support of the recall effort for Governor Newsom, or against Governor Newsom, I should say, those signatures will be turned in on the 17th. I think after that comes in, we'll have a little bit more clarity, but it is an ever evolving situation about whether we're going to have a statewide election this fall. So I can certainly keep you posted on the front.
Great, thank you. But if there is an election, then there would be the possibility of the Ethics Commission, time permitting and public comment and engagement solicited to prepare a ballot initiative if that was the direction we were to go in.
I think at this time we would have to look at the a little bit harder. So the first thing that would obviously need to fall in place is if the recall election is actually called. We may not know that for a little bit. Obviously, the various registrars around the state need to count up the number of signatures, see the requisite number has been turned in. And once that process has moved on a little bit, then we can see what we can do in terms of a local election process as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Shen, if there were an election that was going to include local ballot measures, that deadline typically is what, July or August, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, in terms of getting something to the elections director to get on the ballot and to get the ballot simplification committee, et cetera, there's not a lot of time there, even if there is an election in November.
I think it would be very challenging. I think you're absolutely right, Chair Ambrose. So the general deadline for the submission of initiative ordinances, such as an ordinance that the Ethics Commission could put on the ballot, is essentially E95 or 95 days in advance of the election. So you're correct. That puts you in kind of like early August, maybe late July.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see how the timelines line up this year.
Okay. All right. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed that the board adopts the legislation as we recommended, and we don't have that problem to solve this year. And now I'm going to turn to Commissioner Lee. You had your hand up previously.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to continue the discussion on public engagement. I participated in several in-person interested person meetings, and while I appreciate the staff's effort of putting this together and also the participants, but I do agree with Chair Ambrose that the input that we've been getting are pretty, it is not as broad as I would like to see. So I would like to see if we can expand the public engagement efforts. I know that it's hard for people to commit to a specific time of date. So I wonder if you will open up to invite the broader stakeholder community, which includes a much broader base than what we've been having. The participants, allow them to submit in writing, emails, whatever it is, their opinions, their experiences, so that we can have a broader understanding of what's going on out there, you know, the experience and ideas, so that when we look at the gift rules, we have a broader way of seeing how it should impact the community. I think that it's something that we really need to explore by really expanding our stakeholder community.
Commissioner Bush, can you hear us?
There, I unmuted. Now I'm here.
Okay. All right. It's your turn for comment.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear my fellow commissioners were all seem to be pretty much on the same page. I'm in agreement with all the points that have been raised so far. In terms of taking them in reverse order, Commissioner Lee's point of reaching out to larger groups, I would take a look at the fact that our interested persons meeting pretty much asked people to respond to specific elements of proposals from the staff, whether they agree or disagree with those proposals. And what I would like to see is an outreach at an earlier stage of the process, where we reach out before we have a staff proposal for input about what should go in to a review of gift rules or any of the other issues that we have before us. In particular, this is our opportunity to reach out to greater equality in city government. So to Chinese American organizations, to Black organizations, to Latinx organizations, to gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender groups, as well as to neighborhood groups like the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods, and ask them what would you like to see in the issues? Because people have been reading the same articles we have. They know what some of the problems are, and some of them have had experiences with them. And we have had very little input from them until at the end of the process. It's sort of like the tail wagging the dog, where they come in and tell us, oh yeah, you got it right when you put in this provision, but they didn't get a chance to say, and you should have added these other provisions to deal with it. So that was one point in response to what Commissioner Lee said. In terms of what Commissioner Chu raised about the timing, I think that that's an important consideration. And I would ask us to consider whether or not putting something on the ballot requires that we put a finished piece of legislation, or if instead we can put on the ballot a request that the voters direct us to establish a policy. So for example, a policy to treat permit expediters the same as we do lobbyists. And then from there, we would go on with that direction from the voters to draft something. But at the outset, we're just asking the voters, would you ask us to add these policies? And so I would point that out. Mr. Ford mentioned that he would like us to continue with the conflict of interest as our only policy action for now. And my feeling is that pretty much that is saying that we're not going to reach out to groups other than ourselves to develop the policy recommendations. And yet we know that there are groups like the Brennan Center and others that are very well versed in the same issues, and where we have not yet reached out and said, can you provide support? We know that the district attorney is seeking funding to broaden his capacity to get things done. We know the Department of Elections is doing the same thing, but not with money, but with staff resources, and that others do this as routinely. And so I think that we need to take a look and not concur with the proposal that conflict of interest be our exclusive focus for the next period of time, but be one of the focuses. And the other focuses are pretty clear about what they need to be. For example, we know that April 1st is the deadline for filing Form 700s. And yet I have not seen any advice going out that says that departments, in the interest of transparency and accountability, can provide the Ethics Commission for us to post each department's list of who files, what filing category they fall in, and their job assignment. That's not the same issue that was raised with Executive Director Pelham, where she came back with a number of concerns about just simply putting in the PDFs because of various complications with that, but simply a listing of who has to file, what category they file in, what is their job title, and where can the public access what's been filed, because all of those are public documents, but people don't know where to go and get them. So that's something that I want to see us adopt as our policy as soon as possible. Also, guidance that reminds people that Form 700 should be updated when people's financial interests are changed. For example, say they buy or sell a property, or that they change their marital status, or if they change their job. Those are all occasions for which people's financial interests are altered. And sometimes people think that they don't have to refile until the following April, when in fact they need to refile within 30 days of those changes. And we need to make it clear to the filers that that's the expectation, that take place. I think that we also need to make sure that we provide reminders to the city officials of other disclosable information that's not a financial interest per se. For example, our law does require disclosure of a board membership that's a nonprofit board. So you're not receiving compensation for it, but you are interacting with other people who may have business before your board. And in those cases, people have to recuse themselves, and that is filed with their commission secretary. But the public doesn't see it, and the public doesn't know who's sitting on various boards that are also boards of city departments or boards that are affecting city business. I'd like to see us take up as an urgent matter nonprofit disclosures of not the same as lobbyists and not as others, but nonprofits to disclose, which they do not now disclose, who they contact in city officials and for what purposes. And if they're receiving funding from a source that may have a city interest, who the city interests are that they're doing. So that is an issue that I want to see on our policy prioritization thing, because as we know from the controller's report, about $1 billion in city money flows from the city to nonprofits. Many of those nonprofits are doing things that are invaluable to the city's work, like building building affordable housing, providing counseling and services and so forth. But some nonprofits are not doing that. Some nonprofits exist to lobby the city to change its policies or to lobby the city to appoint people. And we don't have any information on that. It's completely dark and invisible. And I don't think that that's what the public expects. I don't think that's what the public deserves from us. And so I think that those things need to be done very clearly. I'd like to know whether there are any efforts to begin enforcement actions against those people who have failed to file correct Form 700s, such as Mohammed Daru or Harlan at the PUC, who failed to report gifts of travel or whatever else that they got. And we know that because it's been put on record by the U.S. Attorney. And yet it's been months since some of this happened. In one case, in Mohammed Daru's case, it's been a year since all of that was fully documented in court documents. So why are we not moving forward as an ethics commission to say that we want these things enforced? I don't think it's enough to say that we should hold off until others have completed their investigations, because they are going to continue to complete their investigations for their purposes and under their rules. Our rules are you have to file, and you have to file accurately, and if you don't, we're going to come after you. But we've shown that we have no interest in coming after anybody until everybody else's work is done. Well, I don't think that we're last in line, not when we're serving the public. So those are all issues that I believe account for why we need to not look at the conflict of interest as the exclusive focus of policy prioritization. And I recognize that we have limited resources, so I'm asking that we agree that we're going to do an outreach to obtain additional resources. Thank you.
Am I unmuted? Commissioner Chu, I see your hand up. Was that from before, or did you have a further comment? You're muted.
Apologies. I just had a question on page 3 of the memo under section 2B, the waiver request. I don't know if it was my user error, but I did not see the attached memo for the Historic Preservation Commission waiver request. So that was,
Sure.
that was my original comment, but I would also like to echo my support of Commissioner Bush's comments, and I know that we are understaffed with Mr. Ford being the one and only policy person on the team right now, but hopefully, and Mr. Ford, you feel free to defer to Director Pelham. We are making good progress on the hiring of the policy, second policy person who can come in hopefully and hit the ground running and move the work forward. But I would echo Commissioner Bush's comment and encourage us to look towards other organizations like the Brennan Center to help us accelerate the work in this area beyond just the conflict of interest. Thank you.
Sure. So to your first question, Commissioner Chu, that's an error in the policy report. That's an agenda item that was withdrawn at the absolute last moment by the requester, and I failed to go back into the policy report and delete that. So my apologies. That's something that will appear on a future agenda, most likely next month.
Okay, great.
So sorry about that. And to the question about seeking the help of other organizations, I think you'll remember that in phase one, we had extensive participation from the Campaign Legal Center.
Mm-hmm.
They submitted a very lengthy memo. I worked with them in depth. They performed quite a bit of research for us. So I do want to point that out, that we do that already. That's a major part of this project and will continue to be. They're going to be engaged on the next phase, I would assume, as well. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. And also, I do just want to clarify that the policy prioritization plan is not comprehensive of everything that's going on in our office. This is specifically legislative projects. These are projects we're working on where a change to the statute or the regulations are required. It's in no way comprehensive of every priority or project that's going on in our office. It does not include enforcement, it does not include audits, it does not include tech projects, it does not include compliance projects. You'll have to look to the enforcement report for information about enforcement and look to the executive director's report about other program areas. So I just want to clarify that when I say that the conflict of interest project will be our, hopefully will be our sole policy focus, that means legislative focus, that's the only legislation we're looking at right now. Obviously, there are many, many things that we have going on at any given time. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you.
Unmute myself. I just want to follow up and make sure we have some specific direction that we're providing to you, so we don't just raise all these issues and leave you wondering which ones we want to move forward with. And I have one more to bring up, which is on your potential policy projects, you've got the permit consultant program review listed as one that we won't be able to get to in this next quarter, which I understand, but I want to clarify the board's moving legislation on permit expediter to address some of the problems that came out of the corruption scandal. And I presuming that where you put down phase 3 to be determined, or whatever category you want to put it in, that you will keep us abreast of what the board's doing on that front, and that for my purposes, having a review, I mean, right now, permit consultants are supposed to file with us, having given the problems in that area, having our commission review compliance with our existing filing requirements, to me is something that we should keep high on our list. I want to go through the points that Commissioner Bush raised about the Form 700. We can wait. If you could, Director Pelham, if you could address that under your director's report, whether or not we can garner that information from the respective departments and put that in a place where a member of the public or the press would know, would be an easy resource to find out, who had a file and where they could get their hands on it. And then with respect to the nonprofit disclosures, I do expect that that is going to be a very sticky wicket to sort out. I was thinking as he was speaking, well, on the one hand, we know that the ability of nonprofits to basically wash Recology's donations such that they could be given back to DPW and Mohammed Nehru and used for lavish holiday parties is extremely problematic. On the other hand, going to what Commissioner Bush was saying, requiring every community health organization to file a report every time they call DPH to say that they need more vaccines, that, we're going to hear, it's like we are going into an area that is extremely robust in our city. We're very lucky to have so many nonprofits engaged with the city in providing public services. And I do think in that realm, working with the community and with the board, which has got their, fingers on the pulse of the nonprofit organizations who are the recipients of public funds, is going to be important. And at the same time, focusing on the city actors, they know when they are misusing nonprofits by providing them money to accomplish things that they're not allowed to do directly. And so anyway, I think that might require a little bit more work than just one piece of legislation requiring a bunch of disclosure there. And then with respect to the enforcement actions that you raised, Commissioner Bush, I think we'll take that up with the next staff item on enforcement. And with that, I do want to stop and ask for public comment. I'm sorry, somebody was going to speak. No, go ahead. Moderator, if you could please call for public comment on this item, and then we'll have a final word from the staff or anyone else.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action of staff policy report, including policy prioritization plan. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You'll hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. We are checking. Please stand by. We have a caller in the queue. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Thank you. Good morning, San Francisco, and good morning, Commissioner. Again, my name is Ellen Lee Zhao. That is ELLENLEEZHOU. I was the only person spoke in item 2 and 3, now item 4. As of March 9, 2021, San Francisco Public Health website, it says total positive for COVID-19, 34,495. Total deaths passed away from COVID-19, 445 as of March 9, 2021, and still in the hospital, 40 people. Per our public law, health emergency is only good for 60 days from last March 2020 to May 2020, but now San Francisco still in a lockdown mode, restricted business to open, killing San Francisco schools, public business, private business, creating a lot of hate crimes against Chinese, against Asian people, and we need to restore a constitutional city hall for San Francisco people. In 2019, 992 nonprofits recorded in San Francisco, which you just said it today. Thank God for your mouth. You said money laundering to nonprofit. That is exactly what the problem we see for homeless people are dying on the street, for crimes against San Francisco, and the communism politicians running a dictator city hall for the last minimum 20 years that violate our constitution because they use our public money to support killing our unborn babies, support the drug dealers by giving them free needle, 5 million of them a year, and supporting human trafficking, defunding the police to welcome more criminals to create crimes for San Francisco, a bunch of dictators like Mayor Landenpuy, like all the 11 board of supervisors, and the 5 other electoral officials, total 18 of them. You should look into how many of the public officials related to how many nonprofit operators, how they laundry the money to nonprofits in San Francisco. 2020, they are using COVID-19 to abuse public power. 2021, as of today, March 12, 2021, our public schools still not open, still abusing our power policy to stop our business. I thank God, I thank Jesus Christ that 2020 we have 9 people, corrupted people from City Hall and related to City Hall indicted in San Francisco government. I am hoping that you ethics commissions will dig out more, then our city can restore law and order to protect our health, our safety for the entire San Francisco. And I'm also asking
Thank you, caller. Your 33 minutes has expired. Please stand by to see if we have any other callers in the queue.
Chair Ambrose, I just wanted to let you know that I explained to Executive Director Pelham, I have a board meeting today for my organization and I have to jump off for.
Yes, I understood that, that you'll be excused at 10:45. So when the time comes, just log out and Director Pelham can make a note for the minutes.
Thank you.
And thank you for participating. Hopefully we'll get through this and be able to finalize this item.
Madam Chair, there are no further callers in the queue.
All right, public comment on agenda item number 4 is closed. Are there any further comments from the staff? Commissioner Chu, I think you look like you were wanting to speak.
No, I was not, sorry.
Okay.
I'll put my hand down too.
All right, so Mr. Ford, I think that we're gonna.
I'm trying to sort of comment.
Trying to raise your hand. Okay, all right, Commissioner Bush, go ahead, and then we'll give
Stop
Mr. Ford a chance to talk.
Hospital bed. 2 points. In response to the issue that you raised, which is a very solid one, about the over disclosures by nonprofits. I'm really not talking about nonprofits that are providing services and seeking city funding for them per se, but I'm talking about nonprofits that exist to influence city policy and city laws. I was a founder of a statewide nonprofit directed by the Attorney General dealing with AIDS back in the teeth of the AIDS epidemic. And we certainly were seeking to change state law about what constituted a disabling condition. And so that's the kind of thing where you would want to know what is the organization doing and who are they contacting. And we have a number of organizations that are worthy and well established, but whose exist primarily to contact city officials to seek changes in city law. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it should be transparent to the public. it's not the same thing as asking transparency on everybody's nonprofits that providing services to people in the city. That's number one. And number two, the point I want to make is that the issues that I raised, I would like to make sure are clear in the minutes, and I'd like to see that there is action taken on them, because I intend to circulate some of those issues with the comments that have come from other commissioners in order to make sure that we have a decent outreach. I think it's important that we reach out to underserved communities and communities that are not deeply embedded in city hall politics to give us their insights on what's going on. And I doubt seriously that we're getting much from the Latinx communities or from the African American communities. I just don't see it at all in any of the material that we get. And I don't think that you can expect them to do it just by asking them to comment on proposals that we came up with. I think we need to ask them for their proposals on what you need to make as priorities. Thank you.
I guess I'm unmuted. You know, Commissioner Bush, I guess I totally support the idea of encouraging more participation by as wide you know, net as we can throw. In my experience, though, if you're reaching out to people who are not ordinarily engaged in city government and particularly city legislation, and that if you don't specifically, you know, put, you know, some boundaries or proposals in front of them, I mean, what you're going to get back is sort of a generic frustration with government corruption and why isn't my street being paved or what, you know, I mean, I just think, frankly, I'm saying to Mr. Ford, I want to see a menu of options that are a little bit more specific. And I think what you're and Commissioner Lee are saying, I want to essentially do a outreach to people who don't ordinarily participate in the ethics and just generally ask them what ideas they have in mind. And so I think we should be more clear, not that you couldn't reconcile those two things, but I don't want him sitting there scratching his head wondering what is he being told to do between now and the next meeting in April. So I definitely going to try and summarize this. I definitely hear that in response to your point, Mr. Ford, and that we typically engage with stakeholders before we put specific legislative language forward. I'm supportive of that. I do think that if folks would agree that we need to put some parameters around what it is that we're asking people to comment on. So if the next round is gift rules, if we can at least articulate you know, sort of a list of the violations of the gift rules that occurred, that came out of the corruption scandals, and any specific proposals for amending the gift rules, for example, the one concerning the Best Friends Forever exemption that people have been talking about tightening, then that might, and so that when you're reaching out to us people, you're not just asking them, what's your opinion of city government and how can we make it better? Because I don't think we'll get very focused very fast if that's the outreach. So I don't know if that makes any sense to you, Mr. Ford, or the other commissioners. I do see folks' hands up again, and I just want to make sure, Commissioner Bell, because I know we're going to lose you to your prior engagement, if you had any thoughts or if you want to.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, and not much time to express them. I mean, it seems like we're talking about process as well as product. It seems like a process in terms of how we begin to get input about what we want to do, and also looking at the capacity that we have to do that, as well as the product that we have in terms of what we're suggesting. And so it just seems to me that we should, in fact, have a process about everything that we want to do that the staff knows about, so that when the recommendations come to us, they've been through a process that we've talked about and agreed upon. And if that hasn't been created, then I think we need to be about the business of doing that. But at this point, in terms of I don't know what's before us, but in terms of the conflict of interest, I think we certainly want to do that. And the question is, what are the other things in addition to that that we want to do, understanding at this point, we only have one staff person to do it. And so I would suggest that if we are not satisfied with the process, that we do go about the business of creating one that we can live with our capacity to get input, as you suggest, Chair Ambrose, that's targeted input. And I would just say that I am satisfied with the conflict of interest. And if people, my fellow commissioners, want to have other more urgent priorities, I am certainly willing to, that those reasonings sound fine to me. It's just a question of how do we operationalize them.
Okay. Well, thank you. Those are actually very helpful comments and kind of quickly summarize the more wide-ranging conversation that we just had. So appreciated. And we'll follow up for there. I mean, I do think that there has been a process that the commission has followed in doing outreach, and that I think we've all felt like we have not succeeded in engaging a wider stakeholder group. So we'll go back to focusing on how we might better ourselves engender
Right.
that kind of participation.
And I would love to be a part of trying to figure out how to do that. So.
Okay. All right. Very good. I'm going to let you sign off then. And I see Commissioner Lee, you have your hand up. Or Commissioner Chu, either one.
Oh, I think that Commissioner Bell and you did a great summary, widening the aperture, ensuring that we're all aligned on the process, and coming to agreement on what the product is. I think that's a very, very helpful construct in which to think about it. And the only thought I would add with regard to widening the aperture is, walk before we run is to introduce ourselves to the community and be very specific about what we do and how we engage with them, and what kind of input we are seeking from them, instead of a try and boil the ocean, like what do you think of X without any context or background. And I think that the unfortunate backdrop of the ever widening corruption scandal is a common point to start from, and it makes the questions that we have to ask very concrete and understandable. So I think there's a great opportunity there. And then I think my second question was, and we don't need to answer this now, but I would put out there is, what language resources do we have to engage the Latinx community as well as the Asian community? Because, not everyone speaks English as their first language.
Thank you. Commissioner Lee, then, did you have a comment?
San Francisco has a really unique history in supporting nonprofit / community-based, community serving organizations. So I just want to make sure that we made it really clear that when we talk about nonprofits, the perception out there may be very different from the reality that a majority of San Franciscans have experienced in their neighborhood. So I just want to really make clear. And I do agree that we need to have a really focused um, plan. When I talk about outreaching to the stakeholders, expanding it, um, it needs to be focused because a majority of them really don't know what we do. And this is a great opportunity. Everybody knows what's happening in the city, and very few people know the role of the Ethics Commission and the role that they have in advising the commission and um, in reading out corruption. So I think that if we can have a really targeted plan using this budget engagement process to really reach out to key stakeholders who have been in the who's been engaged with us. We have hundreds of nonprofit community service serving agencies, but they also have networks, coalitions, whether they're health, aging, community development, um, um, food insecurity, whatever it is. So I think that if we can take a first step in really reaching out, this is not just a one-off, but I do hope that we can get ourselves committed to taking this one step forward because this is really a crisis. And I think that we know that the PPP that's coming down now is going to create a second wave of um, predators who are going to take advantage of some of the more vulnerable in our population. So I do think that I understand Mr. Ford, his department, and generally the entire commission staff are really overwhelmed. But I do think in the short term, and also in the long run, this is one step that I really think that we need to take by really expanding our engagement by starting out small, getting uh, uh, in contact with folks who represent the broader nonprofit community.
Okay. I'm not sure, Commissioner Chu, if you raised your hand again or no. So I want to go back to Pat Ford and Director Pelham to see if they have any comments or clarifying questions before we sum up and move on. And just so you know, I am going to take a 5-minute break when we finish this item. So Pat, if you who are trying to figure out what we make sense of all this feedback, did you have any questions or comments before we move forward?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think this is fairly clear, actually, and I think it's pretty much in line with exactly how we've approached these policy projects all along. I think this is a difference in quantity, not type. I think, we can try and figure out how to invite a broader swath of folks to our IP process, and any input that you as commissioners have on who those people are would be incredibly helpful. And you are people who are really plugged into the community. So I think having that input from you would be much appreciated. So please do reach out. If you can think of specific groups you think are worth targeting for outreach, let me know. And I'd be more than glad to get in touch with them. And I'll also, on my own, and especially once we have a policy analyst here as well, have that person try to proactively identify more groups to reach out to. So in phase 2, it'll follow the same the same general order that other policy projects, including phase 1 of this project, have taken, which is to first engage the public and then perform research and analysis, make recommendations that we present to you in the form of a memo on findings and recommendations, And that would actually have then our recommendations. And we'd like to meet with the stakeholders again at that point. We usually like to have two touches, once at the beginning when we don't have recommendations yet, but just topics, and we solicit recommendations from them. And then again, once we have recommendations, to hear their reactions to the recommendations. We like to do it at both stages. What I think would also be helpful from what I'm hearing is to have some kind of scoping memo at the beginning of the project where I list out questions that the project will seek to address. I think that sounds helpful, because what I'm sensing is some concern that you don't know what the questions are right now that we're seeking to answer. So I think maybe I can list those out for you, even without a recommendation, because I obviously would not want to ever make a recommendation that's not supported by research. So I would probably just list them in question format at this point, like, should we narrow or abolish the best friends forever exception, for example? And that would be one in a list of possible areas that we're going to look into. So I think that's something I could definitely bring to you next month for you to look at and have a sense of what topics are out there. And then maybe that would get a discussion going of what additional gift rule topics could be added to the list. And I'm more than happy to incorporate that into our process.
Okay, and I think one further thing, because I know you do solicit input from a broad range of organizations, is whether they end up engaging or not. But when you are putting together your list, if you could share that with the commissioners, so that would trigger in their mind, oh, I don't see such and such organization on there. I think that might be helpful, so that we know who your announcements are going out to, that it'll just be a trigger for someone to say, oh, this is going out, I better send them that email address for an organization I know is interested.
Sure, I'd be more than happy to do that. And also through the chair, I would just ask the commissioners, are there any places where you think community organizations are listed? Places where I should go to find a comprehensive list of who are those significant community groups. I would not like to bias the selection of groups with my own personal, ideas on which groups are significant. And I think it would be helpful if we could identify lists maybe that other city departments keep, or lists that nonprofits that support other nonprofits keep, or places we could go that would actually have a list of nonprofits. That would probably also really get the process started, rather than me trying to build a list from scratch. So any ideas you have on that would really be helpful.
Well, and for starters, supervisors from the Rules Committee that have been hearing, and Government Audit that have been hearing the Controller's report, I would ask their legislative aides, because they're also getting public comment independent of what our efforts are on the work that they've been doing on the subject. So they may well have identified some active participants that haven't been coming to the Ethics Commission. Although frankly, I haven't seen a lot of public comment at the board hearings either, but if that would be helpful.
If I can just point out that Friends of Ethics gave the Ethics Commission a disc and a printout of several hundred community groups that are actively involved in city government. And I don't think that list has ever been put to use by the Ethics Commission. But you look on your records and you'll find it's there.
Is that a document that anyone is familiar with? If not, Commissioner Bush, maybe we can revive it through Friends of Ethics if somebody has those files handy. All right, and Director Pelham, did you have any other comments? I do want you to take up the Form 700 issue, and then of course, Mr. Pierce, when we come back and do the enforcement action, we'll talk about both the recent proposed settlement with Recology and how one might proceed against individuals who failed to file Form 700s or comply with the gift rules. And with that, I would like to take a 5-minute break. I'm sorry, Commissioner Chu, did you just raise your hand again? No. Okay, I have, let's just say we'll be back here at 11:05. That's actually 7 minutes, okay? All right, so agenda item number 4 is closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
As soon as I get to the right page here. Which is discussion of Enforcement Division staff report. We're going to have a presentation from Jeff Pierce. If any members of the public intend to offer public comment for this item, they should dial in now and enter *3 to be added to the public comment queue. If you have any questions for Mr. Pierce, please raise your hand and I will call on you. But first, we'll hear from Mr. Pierce.
Thank you, Chair Ambrose and Commissioners. So as you know, last week the City Attorney announced that it had reached a settlement with Recology. Recology San Francisco, the contractor that provides waste management and recycling services for the city and county, for its residents, for city departments, and for commercial entities. The settlement that the City Attorney reached resolved inflated collection rates that resulted from violations of the city's gift laws, the prohibition against bribery and the prohibition against gifts from restricted sources. As far as I could figure out, the settlement is not a public document, or not yet a public document, but the City Attorney did publish a complaint that it filed in San Francisco Superior Court last week, state court, and I have provided a summary of what I believe the City Attorney concluded in the matter with Recology based on that complaint and based on the press release that the City Attorney issued, but also in relation to the federal complaint that the U.S. Attorney filed previously in November against Paul Giusti, who was the, how's the audio? It's not going well. Ronald, you guys able to hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Okay.
Looks like, yes.
Okay, I'll keep going in that case. So yeah, you'll remember that in November, the U.S. Attorney filed a criminal complaint against Paul Giusti, who had been the government and community relations manager for Recology. And the U.S. Attorney had charged Giusti with bribery and money laundering. So if you've had a chance to review the report or to review the complaint itself, you'll have seen that among the attorneys who represented the city in the matter with Recology was Deputy City Attorney Andrew Shen. And so I've asked Deputy City Attorney Shen to address the commission today about that settlement. He's agreed to do so. Hopefully he's still with us. I would just caution the commission that Deputy City Attorney Shen will be constrained in what he's able to say. He'll be bound by the confidentiality of settlement negotiations. He'll be bound by attorney-client privilege, but he's agreed to speak both, I think, to the settlement itself and to broader issues that arise in relation to that settlement. So among other questions that I think the commission may have, I've asked Deputy City Attorney Shen to address what appears to be a legal conclusion in the complaint or in the settlement, that behested payments can operate as gifts, that it is possible to disguise a gift as a behested payment, and as a result, behested payments can also operate as bribes. So with that, I'll hand it over to Deputy City Attorney Shen.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you, Jeff, for the lead-in. I appreciate it. So for those of you who haven't seen it, I think Jeff's memo does a really good job of describing the contours of the settlement with Recology. I should note at the outset that the settlement still does require the approval of the Board of Supervisors, so it's not quite a done deal. But the terms of the settlement, as agreed with Recology, are set forth in the materials that Jeff has sort of put before you. It's also available on the City Attorney's website at sfcityattorney.org. A couple of things I should also clarify, and Jeff, thank you for also laying groundwork here as well. Since this is ongoing pending litigation, there are limitations to how much I can speak to the matter, and especially also as well to legal conclusions, such as the one that Jeff just posited. I can certainly understand from a policy perspective how the Ethics Commission may want to explore those issues regarding behested payments, especially in light of the other things that we discussed today. But given where we are in the litigation, and this being an open meeting, there's only so much I can get you on that front. But one thing I do also want to clarify, just for the benefit of the commission, is that this proposed settlement is separate and apart from the U.S. Attorney's complaint into Paul Giusti. I mean, those are two different legal matters involving different parties. And so I want to be clear about that as well. So I didn't really have a big presentation plan because, as I said, I think Jeff's memo did a great job of summarizing the highlights here. But if people have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
I did have a question about the process going forward. I know Jeff mentioned that the settlement itself is still not a public document, but if you can explain how settlements are subject to board approval and when the actual settlement agreement will be available for the public to review, and what you think roughly the timing might be for that to move through the board.
Yeah, Chair and Bose, thank you for the question. So I'm not sure if I can offer a strict timeline. I mean, obviously, we do want this to move forward relatively quickly, so in the next couple months. But the board does take a little while to process the settlements. And certainly a settlement of this size and of this nature does require the board's approval. And hopefully we have all of their support through the process in those next steps.
So the settlement, if I recall, as a ratepayer here in the city, involves a change in the rate as of April 1st. So is it expected that Recology will honor that regardless of whether or not the final settlement is approved? Because April's just around the corner in terms of getting through the board, couldn't possibly happen in less than 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we're just hoping to get the settlement through as quickly as efficiently possible through the Board of Supervisors process. We want to give them their time to consider the matter thoroughly. But I think we are hoping to move this along relatively quickly. So hopefully everything will go along according to the proposed plan.
Right. And then just vaguely recalling the Good Government Guide and the Sunshine Ordinance, settlement agreements that are at the board have to be available so many days before the hearing or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we'll, do the, once the settlement is presented to the board, it will be a public document and it will be available. And I expect that will happen very shortly. Okay.
All right. Well, good work on that. Congratulations to everyone concerned. It is both horrifying to see that lack of oversight led to that extensive and overcharging of rates, which, as we all know, are very regressive rates. I mean, everybody in the city is required to have a garbage can, and everybody in the city pays the same rate regardless of what their income level is. And so for those folks to have been cheated out of $100 million is really shocking and disturbing, and I'm really glad that that you all were able to get to them and get the recompense that the people in the city deserve. So good work on that. And following up on that, with you, Jeff, I mean, I know one of the things that Commissioner Bush raised with respect to enforcement actions is this whole question of when might ethics engage in enforcement actions on violations of code requirements that are part of the underlying criminal action that's being pursued. And, we've talked about this before, having been in the situation myself where you have the layers of an FBI investigation, a district attorney criminal investigation, maybe civil action, and then, of course, personnel actions. I've long since learned that that the administrative action takes second place to a criminal investigation, just because in an investigation, it's really, it's really important to allow the interviews and the subpoenas and just the whole strategy of eliciting, information from one indicted person against another indicted person. So I've been comfortable with the fact that for this year, we haven't brought any enforcement actions, arising out of those allegations. But in my mind, there are, and not the one that Commissioner Bush mentioned, Mohammed Nehru, because he hasn't actually been pled guilty or been convicted. But there are a couple of other instances, we do have individuals who were charged and who have pled guilty and I think or have been or will be sentenced. And in those situations, I've expressed my view that that there, to the extent that there are violations of Form 700, that certainly whatever action that we might be able to take should also be taken at that point. But I don't think that it makes sense from a resources point of view for us to try to put together the evidentiary basis to show the violations that Mohammed Nehru is alleged to have engaged in, while that work is being done much more intensively by the U.S. Attorney's Office and possibly by the district attorney and city attorney. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on the enforcement question. Now I'm going to turn and see, does anybody have any questions for Jeff or Andrew Shen about the recology or other enforcement matters relating to the corruption scandal? And I see Commissioner Chu's hand up, so please go ahead. You're muted.
So it's Friday. So my questions relate to the Department of Public Works in general, and this touches a little bit on Executive Director Pelham's report around the budget guidance that was received from Supervisor Matt Haney, I think the Budget Committee Chair. What, if anything, do you know, Mr. Pierce, has DPW undertaken with regard to tone at the top and engaging in further training or other efforts to make sure that this kind of behavior does not reoccur? And then second, I believe there was a ballot measure last November that would create a separate Public Works Commission. And, has that been set up, staffed, has it started meeting to provide oversight? So if any information or update that you have on that front would be really helpful, because I think it's really both important and critical to hold people accountable, the actors engaged in this ongoing corruption scandal, but also just as equally important is like what does the city do to start to rebuild trust with residents that this won't happen again?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Chu. To your first question, I'm not aware of what steps Public Works has taken over the course of the last year. It's possible that Director Pelham could speak to that, or that members of our compliance staff have possibly been engaged with the Department of Public Works around those questions. If Deputy City Attorney Shen has additional insights into that, I can defer to him. But similarly, as to your second question about the ballot measure that might create a commission to oversee Public Works, I'll defer to the Deputy City Attorney on that as well.
Hi, Commissioner Chu. So on the second part of your question about the Public Works Commission, I was actually trying to quickly find it when you were actually asking your question. But I can send you further information about exactly when the new Public Works Commission would be set up. It wasn't set up immediately. I think there are certain dates or guideposts about the different steps in actually setting up this new, a department and a new commission. I can try to send that to you offline afterwards. I was hoping to quickly find it in my email, but couldn't track it down.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Of course.
I actually want to speak to that question now about what's being done at DPW on the tone at the top, because that's similarly something that I've been thinking about. I mean, one of the things that we know is that the new city administrator, Carmen Chu, has been appointed, giving her, a few weeks to wrap up her old job as assessor and get her arms around the 40 departments that she'll be managing as a city administrator. I was hoping that sometime in the next couple of months we could invite her to speak to the commission about what she's doing, and I'm sure she must have this on her agenda to address the tone at the top within DPW. Right now, the director of public works is, I believe, appointed by the city administrator, and there's an acting director there now. And I also think that we should reach out to the new city administrator and let her know that we are available, as I'm sure the city attorney has already done, to work with her senior staff on ethics training and guidance to improve the culture of compliance at DPW. Director Pelham, if you could make a note to raise that with me over the course of the next couple months, to extend an invitation to Carmen Chu to speak to the commission about how we might work with her and support her in addressing what I'm sure is going to be a aggressive reworking of the culture at DPW under her watch. And to that point, Commissioner Bush had made a suggestion, which his hand's up, so maybe I should just recognize him and let him make his own suggestion about inviting another guest to speak with us. So Commissioner Bush, if you can hear me, you
Yes,
have
thank
the
you.
floor.
Thank you, Chair Ambrose. I was asking for us to hear from David Anderson, who's just left as the U.S. Attorney, because he had some very salient points in interviews with the press about the need for citizens to become more informed and more attentive to city governments. And I think it would be good for us to hear directly from him. For one thing, it takes us one step beyond just hearing from city officials to hear from people who are outside the city system about what they observe, about how we're functioning and where we might look for improvements. So I'd like to put that on the agenda for our next meeting.
Well, just to be clear, we can extend the invitation. I think scheduling with somebody who's just left such a demanding job, I don't think we can count on him being available for that particular day in April. But Director Pelham, if you can reach out to him on behalf of the commission and ask him if he'd be willing, with the understanding we're not asking him to come in and spill the beans on the intricate workings of his criminal investigation team, but rather what Commissioner Bush just said, that based on his observation of San Francisco and ethical compliance writ large, what observations and recommendations might he have to share with us? And then report back, let me know. Obviously, if he would be willing to do it in April, that'd be great. I just don't want to presume that he is going to be at our disposal on our timeline. So,
Well, they've reopened Disneyland, so he may have gone off to Disneyland.
that's what I would have done after a year that he's had. So, although I'm not planning on going for a while till I see how it works out. But okay, so
I have a few other questions I'd like to raise if I can.
yeah,
in this
please.
The Recology development underscored the value to the business of city approvals, which was into the $100 million range. And I'd like to know what steps we can take to determine the value of agreements that are sought from the city to other entities besides Recology. For example, there was quite a bit of discussion about placing up relay boxes at intersections around the city, or for business vans to take people to San Jose and not use public transit, but their own private things. I know that in the case of commercial approvals from the planning department, that there is a pretty careful analysis of what the value would be of those approvals, because that becomes a basis for assessing what might be done for a percentage of that to go for public or for affordable housing. And I think it would be very important for us to better understand how much our decisions as a city affect the economy and the business interest. So I would like to see if the enforcement division can ask those questions and begin to get some answers to it. That's number one. Number two, what are your plans? Is it under your auspices that there's an audit of the lobbyists in the city?
Through the chair, if I might respond, Chair Ambrose.
Please.
Commissioner Bush, as you know, the lobbying audit program is within the audit division, and that is a position that we're seeking to fill this spring. So I'm hopeful that we'll have more reporting on that. But that is something that is on our project plan for doing a pilot audit by the end of this fiscal year. So that is our hope.
Well, that's quite far off. So
yes, it is. Well, it's yes.
So is it possible to ask the controller or some other office to do that work in the interim until you're staffed up?
Well, as I mentioned, it was fiscal year, so that would be June 30th is our hope. But my short answer is I think we have our plan in place to be able to try and do a lobbying audit. And I think it's essential that if we have a lobbying audit being done, and it needs to be scoped out, it needs to be identified with an understanding of the program. And that is something that it makes sense to me to have the audit manager head up, because that will be critical and essential part of that person's role. So
I understand.
Farming it out to the controller.
I understand your caveats to that, Director Pelham, but your timetable about the end of the fiscal year runs right smack into the question about whether or not we are learned anything from it. It would be valuable to put something on the November ballot if there is a November ballot. And it also does not give much chance for the Board of Supervisors to act, because, as you know, the summer period and then after that, it gets pretty crowded and pretty difficult. So you're really talking about an audit that would be done by the end of June, but which would have no material effect until sometime in 2022. And so I don't think that's a good enough response from us, since this is a law that has been in place since 2015. I understand the resource issues, but I think that there are outside resources that are available to do that audit, even if it's to contract with the FTPC or someone else. I think that that's not something we can let go at this point or postpone that long. That's my personal view. Maybe the commissioner will support it.
I actually have some, I mean, just looking at the calendar, Commissioner Bush, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think getting that position filled and attacking those lobbyist audits has been a unmet priority for too long. But at this point now, where we're already halfway through March, if you tried to get a outside contract with the FPPC and then educate them, you know, on what the compliance requirements were and where the documents were, I don't think you're going to get it done any faster. And similarly, if you know, and I don't know this for a fact, if you went to the controller's office, if we've ever used staff at the controllers to perform a lobbyist audit. But again, at this particular moment in time, the controller's office is going into budget season. We'll be lucky if we can get their time and attention to get our financial questions answered in our budget through, let alone having them take on a piece of our work. So I just operationally, I hear what you're saying. It would be better if we already had it and we're doing something with it. But realistically, to turn to the outside, I don't think we're going to get it any faster than the end of June. And if we're bringing in a new audit compliance manager, having that person be the person who goes through that learning curve to initiate and undertake the audit is an important part of that, sort of professional development and expertise that I wouldn't, I'm not sure it would be to our benefit to have that be learned by somebody outside the organization if we're this close. Now, if we find out that we're not going to get that position filled or our budget gets cut, that's a whole new conversation, because I think we all agree that we are woefully behind on looking at lobbyist compliance. But anyway, that's my more, to use Commissioner Bell's phrase, the operalization of we know what the product is, there is a process, but operationalizing it, I think it's too late to go outside if we're that close. But anyway,
I would just like to underscore that we are not so limited in people who are well versed in this issue. We have people like Dennis Aftergut, who was the chief deputy city attorney and who was involved in drafting most of this legislation. We have people like Ann Revelle, who was the chair of the FPPC and then later the chair of the FEC. Those are people who can be tapped and asked, are you available for a contract for an audit of a lobbyist? After all, it's not all lobbying that you're auditing. You're only asked to audit one lobbyist. And that's not a whole big, huge deal, unless you happen to be auditing recology, but that's a little joke. But otherwise, it seems to me that it's not something that's overwhelming, but it does provide a benchmark for our start in this. So I
hear you, Commissioner Bush, but I think you're forgetting that what it is to get a contract through the city process. I mean, for very good reason. One cannot, as the executive director, even if the commission acted on it, deign that either the FPPC or Dennis Aftergut or Ann Revelle get a contract with the city. I mean, for something like that, if you're going to sole source a contract, you're going to have to go through the HRC and get a determination by them that there's nobody on staff in the city that can perform that function, which we're not going to be able to get that finding because we just hired somebody who specifically intended to perform that function. It is,
with all due respect, if you make the contract through the controller's office and they subcontract it outside, you skip all of those steps that you're talking about, because the controller has unique authority to offer contracts without going through the city process. I've discussed this with our controller, and I know that that's the case.
I hear you that it's possible that in some circumstance for some function that the controller performs that they have preordained sole sourcing authority. Whether or not the controller would use that authority to hire somebody by name that we identified for this purpose, especially going back to the other issue that we already just are hiring somebody on city staff for the intention of having them be the audit manager. I hear your frustration, Commissioner Bush, and I know that we wanted this, done years ago. I just don't know that at this point in time that trying to use those extraordinary measures that we would get a quicker result, or that it would be as easy as you think it might be. I'd be surprised if Ben Rosenfield would be willing to hire somebody that we just specified to do something that we just hired somebody to do on city staff, and with what money and what authorization would there be for that expenditure, et cetera. So it's not, I just don't think it's as easy as all that, but anyway, we can hear from the other commissioners or the executive director. I see Commissioner Chu, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that this is that's not easy to go outside the city, but I also would agree with Commissioner Bush that this, time is of the essence, and this has been pending for a long time. So would propose, like, could we just determine what resources and what the process and timing would even look like to try and go outside? And I think, as Commissioner Bush points out, it is just one lobbyist. We're not trying to boil the ocean here. And then if we could be efficient and focused in our efforts, perhaps it could result in some findings, by June, which would put us way ahead of where we certainly are now. And if we're just having a position posting in April and interviews, and the seat won't be filled before June. And so by the time someone comes in and the audit is underway, and there's the learning curve that you come up as a new hire and getting your feet wet and understanding it all, I mean, it'll be the end of the year before we see the results. And so I think it's worth pursuing and just finding out how feasible it would be and what timeline it would be on to outsource in whatever shape or form would be the most efficient, effective, and efficacious.
Thank you.
And Director Pelham, if you please.
I didn't know if there was another commissioner's hand up. I completely appreciate the sense of urgency and also, the fair sense of frustration that we all have about not having completed the lobbying audit by this time, and that it is on schedule but not yet a deliverable. So I fully respect that concern, and I want to assure you that I and our team are trying to be as responsive as possible. I think it is important for me to help set expectations from my experience, and that is in reaching out to try to scope out and develop a contract to even do this will divert vital attention and focus away from the completion of our hiring process. We're not in the position of posting. We actually have posted these as of December and have been making, as I'll indicate in my executive director's report, we've been making some significant headway in getting to seats being filled. And so I'm hopeful that that is not going to be June before these seats are filled and the work is being done. But that said, the time frame is not optimal for any of us, but it is something that I am very concerned about. If the commission were to be asking for us to develop a contract, to spend time on thinking about how that would work, that takes resources we don't have. And what we do have is an initial plan, potential seat being filled in the next month to start the work. And I strongly believe that's where our focus needs to be in order to make progress on this work, even though it's not optimal. So I would say it's also to Commission Chair Commissioner Ambrose's point, it has been difficult to get information and communication, increasingly will be with the Controller's Office, obviously because of the budget. So I do think that all things considered, my role as executive of the department is to try and give you the best feedback possible about what is doable with what we have and where we are with the priorities that are ongoing. And I strongly feel that we need to be able to get this seat filled and to be able to get this work done as soon as the seat is filled, rather than diverting resources on a project that may yield a further time frame than any of us want. So I just wanted to share that perspective from a boots on the ground standpoint. Thank you.
Chair Ambrose.
Let me just ask a clarifying question. Will the commission be putting out in the next period of time a listing of all of the registered lobbyists? How many are there? How much money are they paid? How many clients do they have? Just your basic drill that you would want to know. How many contact lobbyists? How many expenditure lobbyists? How many clients for permit consultants? So we can see the lay of the land. What are you looking at? And I have not ever seen a document like that that came out of us.
Through the chair, if I
And
might
that'd be done.
respond. Yeah, just a brief note, again, jumping to the executive director's report, not getting too far afield, but that information is in the ED report this month. It is posted on our website, so I'm happy to direct you to that or take a further discussion offline if that's useful.
Chair Ambrose, I would just thank you, Director Pelham, for that perspective. So I would just ask that you keep us posted going forward on the progress and the timing of the hiring, as you know, and we can, fingers crossed, move with all deliberate speed to get the seat filled and, you know, move ahead, get embarked on the audit as expeditiously as possible.
Chair Ambrose, you are muted.
Okay, the next item is the director's report, so we'll give her a chance to speak to that at that time. I want to go back to Mr. Pierce and also to our deputy city attorney, who has another meeting at noon. So if there are any further questions for Mr. Pierce about the enforcement report and or for the city attorney, if we could turn our attention to that. And then I'm going to take one round of questions and then we need to ask for public comment. So go ahead, Commissioner Chu, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ambrose. Mr. Pierce, I had a question on page 4 of the report, the city attorney investigative holds. There's one hold which is 25 months and the statute of limitations is October of next year. And I just wanted to know, like, what is the plan, since we've got a little more than a year and a half, a little bit less, I can't do the math right now, about a year and a half left. And so in order to allow ourselves enough sufficient time to be able to conduct our own investigation, is the plan to connect and communicate with the city attorney that we'll be moving forward, given the average age of matters in open investigation as of March 2021 is 21.1 months. That's less time than we have here left on the statute of limitations.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Chu. I appreciate the oversight and the attention that you've given to the report. We have been in ongoing conversation with the city attorney's office about this particular matter. What I can tell you without revealing confidences is that the allegations that our office or that the city attorney might investigate are effectively identical. And so the question here is one of potentially needless duplication. My understanding from my most recent communications with that office is that the city attorney had in fact pivoted back to this particular matter and had raised it to a point of priority for that office. There are some sort of complex personnel issues that are at stake around the edges of this matter, and so so far it has been our view that the city attorney is better positioned to view the totality of those considerations, but I appreciate the caution about the statute of limitations.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we're not in a position that we are running up against 6 weeks left, and then there's nothing we can do because we haven't yet started. So I think it's all well and good that there's an overlap and that there's you want to avoid the duplication of effort, but I wouldn't want to forego the opportunity and the obligation that we have to conduct our own investigation, even if there is an overlap in jurisdiction. And then my second question is on referrals to the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue. I keep coming back to this, you know, Chris Jackson's 2013, we're heading in, by the summertime, we'll be 8 years into this. And I know that Isabel Urbano, were unable to enforce the collections due to the statute of limitations has expired. So I guess more, you know, broadly, and this is kind of my broken record here. Is like, what are we doing? How do we move this forward? Chris Jackson's been on this list since I joined the commission, and that was 5 years ago almost. So I mean, I think we either can we take it back, can we move this forward, but it just seems like we're treading water here, or the Bureau is treading water and not making much progress. And I realize that there is the the pandemic hasn't helped, but even before the pandemic, we're 5 years into this.
Yeah, I understand your frustration, Commissioner Chu, and you're not alone. As you know, your colleagues have expressed a similar frustration about the pace of collection here. I would just remind you that it's possible, I suppose, for commission staff to take a matter back, but commission staff historically have not been positioned to conduct themselves as collection agents, and so it would be a kind of new sort of action for the commission to undertake, and it would divert obviously resources from the kinds of matters that we ordinarily invest in. That having been said, we do communicate with the Bureau regularly. One update that I can provide for you is if you look at the matter regarding Lynette Sweet, this has been of particular concern to the commission for a long time because the underlying liability there regarded potentially a misuse, or at least a failure to adequately account for the use of public funds from an election from some years ago. The Bureau did secure a settlement with Ms. Sweet in that matter. The settlement had provided for a payment plan. You may remember that the commission had expressed its approval that we pursue effectively the amount of damages to the city, the amount in unaccounted for public funds, which was a figure around $20,000. Ms. Sweet defaulted on that settlement. On the terms of the settlement itself, one of the terms of default is that the penalty would then be $30,000. The tax attorneys from the Bureau have brought that settlement to San Francisco Superior Court. They have obtained judgment against Ms. Sweet by virtue of a motion to enforce the settlement agreement, and so we are now coordinating with that office about what next steps to take in terms of how to actualize the judgment that the city has now obtained in that matter.
That's great news, great progress. So hopefully we can continue and we'll actually receive some of these funds, these public funds back. That'd be great. But I would just like to request as we go forward, because I don't want to keep having the same conversation each month about Chris Jackson. So like, what are we, what is the definition of insanity, right? You keep doing the same thing and I'm expecting a different outcome. What are we going to do differently to get to a different outcome is my question, I think, for this. And what we collectively, sort of the city apparatus, but also, the ethics commission individually, like what can we do, what are the other alternatives? Because working through the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue is not yielding the results that we all would like to see. So I invite you to work forward maybe a little and see what other viable options there might be for resolving a lot of these matters.
I think one of the problems that we have right now, whatever tools you might have had in your toolkit previously, with the court shut down and not being able to file small claims actions, the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue has even fewer resources than they had in the years past, where those debts were seemingly unrecoverable. I would also ask, what is our policy for when we determine that it's not worth having staff time try and get, blood from a stone, or however that metaphor goes? Because if that person is gone into hiding and or unemployed and has no recoverable assets, then it does become whatever, unproductive to be paying people to try and keep filing against them. But anyway, Mr. Pierce, and then I actually, you know what, while you're thinking about your answer, can you call for, no, that won't work. Never mind. Go ahead, Mr. Pierce. We have to do public comment yet on this item.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the feedback related to the Bureau. I can approach them and have ongoing conversation. You're right, Chair Ambrose, about the impact of the pandemic on the court system and on the resources and options available to the Bureau. I would add that in addition to that, we have generally agreed over the course of the last 12 months with the Bureau that even in the face of certain opportunities to seek collection, we basically, as I think every other city department did, authorized the Bureau to adopt a somewhat softer posture during an economic period that has introduced a lot of challenge and uncertainty for many parties. So you will see that there are a number of hearings on the calendar. Granted, those hearings have been postponed a number of times over the course of the last 12 months. So I suppose at this point we can't necessarily count on their actually taking place in August or in certain cases in April. As to the question about what standard the Bureau applies on when, whether there's a kind of threshold where continuing to invest resources somehow outweighs the benefit of what they might derive from a successful action. I mean, I think overall that's just something we defer to the Bureau on. You may recall that the Commission doesn't pay the Bureau per se. The Bureau takes under the MOU that we have with that department, the Bureau takes a cut of whatever collections they succeed in obtaining. But if your question is about whether the city is paying staff of the Bureau to pursue these penalties, again, I think the Bureau likely has its own internal standards about how they weigh those options. But if it would interest and benefit the Commission, I could inquire of them and see if that's something we could gain insight into.
Yeah, I think you could hold on that until we know that they actually have some tools, because I think right now they're going to tell you that everything is kind of on hold. I mean, they can't be spending a lot of staff time because they can't file anything in small claims court, et cetera. I do want to move on and have our moderator call for public comment so that, and I guess, Mr. Shen, I know you had another commitment for another meeting, so I'm sorry. Commissioner Bush, as soon as we call for public comment, as soon as he's done with that, I'll come back to you for your comment. Anyway, go ahead, moderator, go ahead and call for public comment.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you've just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 5, discussion of Enforcement Division staff report. If you've not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have no callers in the queue.
All right, then public comment on agenda item number 5 is closed. I did want to recognize Commissioner Bush for his final comments before we proceed. Commissioner Bush.
Thank you, Chair Ambrose. I have a question about whether or not we have authority to bar people from being appointed to city positions while we have pending enforcement actions against them on unpaid fines. In the past, I've seen cases where someone was appointed by a mayor and was forced to resign from the office under deeply troubling circumstances, and then was reappointed by the Board of Supervisors because they had a lot of political juice. And unless we have some sort of steps that include disallowing people to be appointed to city appointments, I don't know that there's anything that would interfere with that taking place, even if someone owed $1 million to the city. Is there something?
Thank you, Commissioner Bush. I'm not aware of any provision in the charter or in the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code that would empower the Ethics Commission to do that. I'm quite sure that if an individual who owed the commission money were nominated to a position of appointment, we might communicate with the appointing authority about those outstanding fines. But I do not believe that at this time, city law empowers the commission to effectively bar individuals from serving.
Well, in the absence of our deputy city attorney, I can tell you, I mean, under the charter where the appointing authority is either vested in the mayor or in another commission, there's no possibility of the Ethics Commission being able to control the appointing power of those other entities, absent probably, if you want to do it across the board, a charter amendment, but at a minimum legislation that gives, and it wouldn't be the Ethics Commission, somebody else at HRC, the right to reject applicants as not being qualified if they had a fine outstanding. So no, I don't think we could do that easily. What we could certainly do, though, is what you just suggested, which is to alert various appointing officers about our outstanding fine list. There are some folks on there who are in high profile, sort of positions, whether inside of government or otherwise. Commissioner Bush, did you have any other questions or comments? I also see Commissioner Lee, you have your hand up.
In the event that someone is being nominated and going through the Rules Committee process, for example, there's no reason why we cannot inform the Rules Committee to put into the file that that person has a judgment pending against them that's unmet at this time.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. If you're aware of anyone in particular, I think that would be the thing, knowing in advance by the time it actually gets on the agenda, the appointing person has already made the appointment, but so,
Lynette Sweet, for example, was a member of the Redevelopment Commission.
Right, previously, right, but not currently. But if you know of anybody currently who's pending before rules who's on that list, then yeah, I definitely think they would be appreciate knowing that there was an outstanding fine. Commissioner Lee, if you wanted to go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. I also like to suggest, instead of us having to follow up like who's applying for whatever, it may be good practice for us to reach out to the Rules Committee to say, hey, as part of your background checks of all the applicants, please include us when you're doing the background check so that we can check on our records if that person has any outstanding issues with us. So that may be a much easier way than us having to keep track of who's being nominated each day, because it's been done across the country. That's part of background checks. You just add the Ethics Commission as part of the organizations they have to reach out to.
Okay. And Commissioner Chu, is your hand up? No.
No, I was just giving the thumbs up to
Okay.
Commissioner Lee's suggestion.
Okay. I did want to come back really quickly because I want to follow up and make sure that the points that Commissioner Bush raises, we have at least a discussion in response to. Commissioner Bush, you raised the issue about doing getting a handle on what is the value of the entitlements or approvals that the city grants. And, obviously, as you had referenced, there's so many different buckets of of financial actions that the city takes. And yes, with respect to real estate development, there's actually an ordinance that requires that the fiscal impacts, the financial impacts of a particular development project be part of the entitlement approval. But I think as a matter of a routine business, if you ever watch the Budget and Finance Committee hearings, the legislative and budget analyst does an analysis of every contract that goes to the board, which is every contract of more than $1 million or more than 10 years in duration. And as part of what the Budget and Legislative Analyst Office is doing is assessing the value of that agreement in relation to the benefit that the city's receiving. And frankly, for every contract that does go to the board, obtaining a thumbs up from the Budget and Legislative Analyst Office is the essential for being able to get a vote to get out of Finance Committee. So that process of vetting that is happening. I think what you're getting at is looking at the role of the Ethics Commission in policing all of that activity, the behavior of contractors relative to the decision makers. And we haven't really talked about this, but will under Director Pelham's item, justifying our budget and the work that we're doing, given the enormous value of these activities that the city's engaged in, where ethical behavior is essential to ensuring that the city is getting the benefit of that, it makes it easy in our minds to, justify not only the budget requests that we put in, but, considerable more effort to make sure that we're getting the value. But I did just want to comment that analysis is available on any given item, and then probably Ted Egan, our city economist, could give you a off the top number on what is the overall value of the city's contracts and entitlement and various approvals in terms of a macro number. And with that, I actually want to close this item, number 5, and call, because we are getting past the noon hour, I want to call agenda item number 6, discussion of Executive Director's report and update of various programmatic and operational highlights of Ethics Commission staff activities since the Commission's previous meeting. And Director Pelham, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Chair Ambrose. I wanted to just highlight, I think in a slightly different order, the information that's in the report this month. First, much interest obviously in our hiring and staffing situation. And first, you should know that we regrettably said goodbye to Amy Lee, who was one of our auditors. She'd been on staff since 2010, and she took a promotional opportunity this month within the city. So she's staying here doing budget analyst work over at Zuckerberg SF General. But we are sorry to have seen her leave because she's just been a tremendous asset on our audit team and a delight to work with. She was very instrumental in doing a lot of work in the public financing program over the last several years. So we were sorry to see her go, but know that the city is still benefiting from her skills, and that's really very, very encouraging. In terms of other staffing transitions, we have been very much focused office-wide on continuing to make progress on our 5 hiring positions in our hiring plan. that we posted in December have had candidates been going through the minimum qualification process. The interview process has been underway. So I am hopeful that we will have information to share with you at next month's meeting in more detail. I don't have that detail that I can share today, but I think we were all very happy with the progress that we've been able to be making in terms of filling these really, really important roles. So I look forward to sharing that with you next month. In terms of our hiring, in terms of our outreach and engagement activities, the report goes through a variety of mechanisms we've been using to try and reach out to folks with in a remote environment. The commission has been discussing a bit of tone at the top, and I think one of the most essential components about that is making sure that information is getting into the hands of department heads and all employees of the city about what might be incompatible activities. And one of the most sort of core pieces of our work is our departmental statements of incompatible activities. You know that these are documents that are established for every department. They identify activities that might be incompatible with work and the mission of each department. Those are required under city law to be distributed to all officers and employees by April 1st. So we have provided, as attachment number 1 for this report, we've provided that information directly to department heads last week, and also was able to do a brief presentation at this past week's department head meeting that the mayor holds to remind folks about the importance of getting this information around to their employees, because it governs and potentially restricts activities, whether they are compensated or not. So it's important that all employees know about this. Separately, there also has been outreach that Deputy City Attorney Andrew Shen and I engaged in, as you know, from a couple of years ago, as part of the agreement with the city and the Municipal Executive Association, the bargaining unit that represents the city managers. Andrew and I were able to do a session online to walk through, again, how the city's framework of ethics laws applies, how those laws serve to uphold public service and the public trust, and also then to touch on some questions about the Form 700 filing process. I also did a session at the end of February with the city's digital services team that is housed within the city administrator's office. This is something we had been on in a planning stage to do prior to the pandemic, but we're able to finally do this, and that was, I think, a helpful session as well. For many of whom were new to city government, so this was a nice opportunity to be able to set out what the parameters and framework is for the city's ethics, comprehensive ethics approach. As to the Form 700 filing season, this has been a very, very busy time for our office. I think, as you all know, the statements that are our fundamental disclosure tool to avoid conflict, detect, and avoid possible conflicts of interest are through filing public disclosure forms known as Form 700. They are due, as usual, on no later than April 1st. Under state law, that is a requirement. Last year, you may remember that the deadline shifted because of the emergence of the pandemic. That has now been moved back to its regular April 1st deadline. So beginning in January and over the last several months, our team has been putting information out, updating tools on the webpage, and also working with filers in online training sessions to provide information in depth about questions they might have on their Form 700. We've been partnering with Andrew Shen on that as well. And we've been making those video links available on our website afterwards. We've had a very good feedback for people who have been able to access the videos or access the live training. We actually had 80 filing officers participate in these sessions, 2 sessions we did this season, which is far more than we've seen in the past number of years. So that was very encouraging. I think these video sessions for filers is probably a thing that will be sticking around for a while. And we were really excited to see the level of engagement on that. There is one last session for filers who file hard copy statements as Form 700 filers, those designated filers that we're working to get electronically filing by January 1 next year. We have a session on March 17th. It's WebEx, and there's information on our website where people can go and log in directly to that session when it's on up and running next week. I also wanted to highlight that some of the questions from earlier, I think this has been really helpful and informative about really the need to make sure the public has the ability to access information, even about these paper filers, prior to the time that we have electronic filing. There are a number of complexities that keep it, a sort of a difficult and thorny problem. But I think one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that we do have on our webpage it on our web pages currently, a listing of all filing officers and department heads. It's a table, it's on a place. I think we can do a couple of things to address the goals that Commissioner Bush, you were raising, and Chair Ambrose, that you were stating as well. Making sure that we have a place where people can go to know where they can access the information, who they need to reach out to. I think there's a minimum step we could do as a first blush of adding to the information we currently have on our webpage two direct links. One is to an email to the person who actually would be responsible to responding to a public request for a Form 700 of a designated filer that is on paper rather than currently electronically filed. And I think the other thing is a link directly to the code location that lists all positions that are required to file under the law. Now, that doesn't yet give names of who fills those seats, but I think this could be something we could do that helps give people a place to go to ask for the forms, and in a step towards accomplishing, I think, the goals that you've been articulating. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight in terms of the budget that I think as Commissioner Chu mentioned, we did submit our budget, of course, at the end of February. We submitted, also issued publicly the Commission's statement on the budget through our Twitter feed and broadly. And then this month, the chair of the Board of Supervisors Budget and Appropriations Committee issued a letter calling on departments to come prepared to this year's board budget hearings at the committee level to talk about, one, how are they eliminating waste and corruption, how they're working to rebuild the city post-COVID and so forth, but to really make eliminating corruption and waste number one on the question that they should be expecting to address, and how are departments working to set a tone at the top. So we will be, of course, reaching out and providing whatever background might be helpful to the budget committee as it goes forward in discussing those questions with departments. And we will continue to update our webpage about the budget so that any documents we have issued or prepared for this process will be available on our webpage related to our FY22 budget development. I think I'll pause there. I'm sure you may have some questions for me, but I wanted to highlight those items given the conversation today, as well as items that were on the report in your packets this month.
I'm going to ask a quick question about the budget that you just explained before I forget it, which is simply that you'd mentioned hearings that Supervisor Haney's calendaring. I'm assuming those hearings aren't until after the mayor presents her budget to the board, which would be May 1st, correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding. This would be the normal board hearing process, which does happen after the mayor has submitted her proposal to the full board.
And that's going to include his request on tone at the top. He's the budget committee chair. He's asking them to speak to, so we won't hear what they're saying about that until May. And then for you, when do you hear back from the mayor's office in terms of what they're actually going to submit to the board? Do you get like a preview copy a week before or something?
Usually it's very much on the eve of. We are and will continue to be in conversation with the mayor's office to try and understand if there's any change that's in the offing. But often it is the case that departments are not aware of the exact numbers until the budget is actually issued. Now, there are a couple of things that I think are notable at this point, as we've seen talked about publicly. The federal COVID funding, restoration funding that's coming back to cities and states. I think the city is anticipating receipt of a significant amount of funds on that front. So I think there has been some discussion about, is the city better poised to address the budget in the coming year than we were a number of months ago. So I think it perhaps is a moving target as those funds come to cities and states, but we will certainly be in touch regularly with the mayor's office, our budget analyst, to continue to explore what, if any, impact that has on the targeted cuts that were, identified in our budget letter, but also to continue to make the case for the kinds of resources that we need to address the kinds of issues that are very much at the top of your mind and very much at the top of our minds. How do we support departments in providing the best and the strongest resources possible to ensure we've got not just a strong tone at the top, but actually strong framework for ethics and practice throughout departments.
Can you make a note to calendar a specific item on the budget for discussion and possible action for the May meeting, so that when we find out how we fared in the process, we're in a position to respond with accolades and support or dismay and hand wringing. And then I wanted to go back, first of all, Amy Lee, that is great for her and terrible for us to lose somebody with that level of expertise in an area where we're already challenged is definitely, you know, bittersweet, and we're on the bitter side of that. So I want to hear, I know that you were already advertising for an auditing position, but that's a much more senior position now that you're going to have to backfill, and not, you know, it's none of the commission's business to get into your particular hiring and personnel. I just, you know, I'm hoping that in terms of requisitions and the things that you need, and by way of cooperation from the HR department, that you're going to be able to quickly backfill as well as augment your auditing staff. I think you lost somebody else in that division earlier this year.
We lost actually an investigator. Again, Tommy McLean, who was one of our senior investigators, was on disaster service work duty for the past year, and he accepted an offer that they made to him to move permanently into doing work supporting the city's emergency response and food insecurity. So that, again, tremendous loss for us, another position that we will be looking to provide more information and updates on in terms of filling the positions. To your point about your question about the support from DHR, we have had very strong support every step of the way from our DHR partners, our Human Resource Department partners, through the MOU that we have with them, and that has been very heartening. So we have been, as I think I may have conveyed over the last several meetings, that we are across divisions, as each of these positions touches every division in the office. Division leads, managers have been actively engaged in really being a part of this hiring process, and so it has had an impact office-wide. But as you all know, it's just critically important to make sure that we can get through this as quickly and effectively as possible, so that we can welcome new faces and introduce them to you, as soon as we can.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see some other hands up. Commissioner Chu, did you have some comments or questions for the director?
Yes, I just wanted to also comment on, Amy Lee's departure, and I wholeheartely agree with Chair Ambrose's assessment that it's bittersweet. She did some stellar and just absolutely time critical work on public finance audits. I think it was in 2019. She did 2 or 3 back-to-back, or supervised 2 or 3 back-to-back, and was presented to us as well. So I am delighted for her professional growth in this promotional opportunity. But yeah, she leaves some very big shoes to fill for us, and hopefully we'll be able to find someone equally as good who can grow in the role and take us to the next level. And just wanted to comment, I hope that this new focus on tone at the top and the compliance efforts undertaken by the varying departments now being called out by Supervisor Haney. I'm really pleased to see that. I hope that continues. And just as a broad observation, I would love to start a dialogue with Supervisor Haney or the Budget Analyst Office, where I think that we have proposed in our budget the 28% increase, where we are going to derive funds from the general fund to build the infrastructure to be able to deliver more training and more information, be able to push all of that out. And I would really like, if there's the opportunity, to explore maybe shifting that mindset where it's not just ethics pushing out content and expertise and being available to consult and all of those great things, but what are the obligations on the part of the different departments to be proactive and take the initiative and invest themselves, not only the time of their people, but their resources, so that it would be, and it could be, a structural thing where the mayor and the boards of supervisors say that in all departments with public contracting, every department needs to have a training program. And if you don't do it yourselves, then the best what you need to do is you need to have an MOU with ethics in order for us to have a repeatable and documentable process that's consistent, that is updated and is current with all the changing requirements of the laws and regulations, such that we are not always just trying to push the rock uphill on our own, but that there's also a pull structurally from the other side. And I think that could, if we could accomplish that, I think it could really accelerate the work that we do. So I would invite further discussion on that down the road as something of a partnership with the board, and I'm not sure who the right organizations are, but to create something that is sustainable for the city, and to really make a difference and start to create infrastructure and processes and procedures, and the biggest and most important thing of all, culture, and that tone at the top that can make sure that what has happened to us, that we have learned from this and that it will not happen again in the future. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Bush, I see your hand up, please. Can you hear me, Commissioner Bush?
No,
No, you're not muted. Very good.
I feel like I'm in one of those commercials. Can you hear me now?
I know.
Director Pelham, can you provide examples for us to use for outreach purposes of budgets and specific duties that we could obtain outside funding for? For example, what would it cost and how would we use additional resources for analyzing all the budget, all the finance, all the lobbyist reports, which lobbyists are filling out all the blanks and which ones are not, or something pretty prosaic and simple, but which is informative and gives us a picture of where things are. How many permit expediters are making contributions to the people who they go to on behalf of clients? How much money is coming from independent expenditure committees aimed at electing a specific official, and which is then as an independent expenditure committee normally able to accept contributions of any amount and without regard to city restrictions. Though there is certainly a question as to whether or not that's legal. So I'm asking whether or not you can identify some specific tasks and budgets that will be required to do them.
To respond to your question, if I understand it correctly, Commissioner Bush, if you're asking, can I identify a scope of work that involves answering a list of questions and what that would look like cost-wise if we were to seek outside assistance to answer those questions? I'm not sure I have enough information to provide that to you right now. I think I need to understand the scope of what questions we're trying to answer first. So that, in theory, yes, I can provide you with a sense of what kinds of hours might be involved in certain tasks. I'm not sure that necessarily translates to what you're looking for in terms of what it would cost to farm out to somebody to do that. So I might need a little bit more information about what you're looking to get answers to, and if maybe some additional context to be helpful.
Well, as a rule of thumb, I'm looking for information that would help guide us as we look to whether there's enough issues there to justify moving forward on our own with legislation or other policy changes. So for example, if you're looking at permit consultants, how many of them are making gifts to people? How many of them are making contributions? How many of them are making contributions to third-party groups? Just, your basic lay of the land. Same thing goes with independent expenditure committees that are aimed at a specific candidate for election or defeat. Or as Commissioner Lee, I believe it was earlier, asked questions about recall money and the money that goes, what are the guidelines on money for recalls? I think that we are looking forward to a period here where recalls are going to become a new infection in our city bodies.
Chair Ambrose, if you're trying to speak, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Chu, did you have your hand up?
No, sorry, it was from before.
Okay. Commissioner Bush, I hear you off the top of your head seemingly identify a number of subject matters that you think are interesting questions and would want to know if we can answer them, and if not, are these things that we could delegate to the Brennan Institute or another organization to do discrete research? I mean, one of the ones in terms of finding out who permit expediters are giving their money to on a third party basis. I'm not sure that that's something that, would be easily discovered even by a professional. But in any event, I actually think, subject to your, being available to do it, that given your long history with these issues, if you wanted to identify some questions that you'd like to know the answers to, and then you and I could talk with Director Pelham about whether or not those are things that are, quick work within the scope of our, existing and soon to be improved resources, and or something that, some third party group might want to take on as a research project, either at a academic student group or other institute, because your ability to just to see what information might be useful to connect the dots, I think, is something that we should take advantage of. So think about that while the moderator calls for public comment on this item. If you could please, moderator, see if we have any public comment.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 6, discussion of Executive Director's report, an update of various programmatic and operational highlights of Ethics Commission staff activities since the Commission's previous meeting. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You'll hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. There are no callers in the queue, Chair.
All right, public comment on agenda item number 6 is closed, and I'm going to call agenda item number 7, which is discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. If any member of the public intend to offer public comment for this item, they should dial in now and enter *3 to be added to the public comment queue. Do any of my fellow commissioners wish to identify any matters for future meetings? And I'm going to start off by saying we have identified that you will extend an invitation to David Anderson, the former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District, and that in May you will calendar the budget so you can give us a report on the mayor and we can take some response.
Chair Ambrose, may I just add one correction? I think we had May 1 designated as the date that the mayor submits her budget. I think I'm stand corrected that it's June 1st. But in any event, as developments warrant, we can present in May what we know at that point, certainly, or even sooner if we know something.
Oh, I see. Why? That's so funny because I have it in my mind that the mayor submits it in May, so not till June 1st. Okay.
That's my understanding. So we'll
Oh,
make sure
you're doing it, so I'm sure you know. Okay.
somebody in the office knows. Clearly, I don't.
Well,
but-
then you don't have to calendar it as a separate item, just as part of your director's report in May, if you can give it an update, and then for the beginning of June, just so we have it on calendar as an action item. So if we need to send a message to the board that says either, hopefully, please approve this in full, and or please add back all the things that got deducted. I just want to make sure we have time to act.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anything else from the other commissioners? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to have you, moderator, if you could please call for public comment on this item.
Madam Chair, am I muted? Oh, I'm not. Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Had to go to the other screen. Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 7, discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. As a reminder, public comments may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Once again, written comments should be sent to the ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have no callers in the queue.
Thank you. Public comment on agenda item number 7 is closed. I'm now going to call agenda item number 8. Additional opportunity for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to Ethics Commission Bylaws, Article 7, Section 2. If you've not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You'll have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you are on the line with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you could go ahead and I might have just read your speech there, so let's just jump right ahead if there are any callers in the queue.
Okay, please stand by. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 8, additional opportunities for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to Ethics Commission Bylaws, Article 7, Section 2. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. Please stand by. All right, Madam Chair, we have no callers in the queue.
All right. Public comment is closed on agenda item number 8. I'm going to call agenda item number 9, which is adjournment. Commissioners, do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
And a second? Commissioner Lee, thank you. And actually, Ron, can you stay on just for one quick second? I just want to show you something after we adjourn the meeting.
Oh, sure.
So the motion's moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. Moderator, will you please call the roll?
A motion has been made and seconded to adjourn the meeting. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Lee,
Aye.
Chair Ambrose.
Aye.
With 4 votes in the affirmative and 0 votes opposed, the motion is approved unanimously.
The motion to adjourn carries, and thank you. That concludes the March 12th, 2021 meeting of the San Francisco Ethics Commission. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
This is like